Alan Pace, The Dunbar Job, Inside Man, Outside Line, September 1997. An armored cash depot sits in an industrial district of Los Angeles. Concrete, cameras, and steel. Inside, the week's harvest from ATMs and armored routes stacks in plastic-wrapped bricks. Outside, a van waits in a place that isn't suspicious until later. No sirens, no ski masks at a teller's window. Just a quiet breach, a few minutes of organized pressure, and a vault that will be greeted at dawn like a punched-out lung. When the counting is done, the number is a headline. Nearly $19 million gone. Investigators will call it the largest cash robbery in U.S. history at the time. The press will call it the Dunbar Heist. The man at the center doesn't look like a movie villain. He looks like what he was, an employee who knew the rhythms of the building better than its architects did. His name is Alan Pace. No roaring guns, no wild parade, just knowledge. Chapter 1. Early life and background. The employee who watched. Alan Pace III grew up like so many Angelenos in the long shadow of the city's bright surfaces. Schools, summer jobs, a taste for cars, and a steady paycheck. He wasn't famous. He was punctual. He found work where discipline pays in trust. Dunbar Armored, one of the country's big names in cash logistics. The job: move money for other people. Count it. Keep the system breathing through weekends and holidays. He wasn't an outsider peeking through blinds. He was inside, on the routes, near the vault, familiar with shift changes and blind corners. He learned a language most of us never need to hear. Camera arcs, guard routines, the times when a door is opened because it has to be, not because someone wants it to. What begins as routine can become ritual. Ritual can become boredom. Where keys are issued, faith is lent, and daily routes can turn to rent. Every cautionary tale has a storm front. Struggle that turns a thought into a plan. Chapter 2. Struggles and failures, the pressure that bent the line. Life doesn't have to come apart to get risky. It only has to lean. Bills pile, ambitions bump into ceilings, and the brain that once found pride in routine starts to itch for leverage. There were rumors of trouble at work, of strife beyond hours, of a last day that ended badly. However, the particulars line up. The path is familiar. Access becomes temptation. Frustration becomes rationale. He took inventory of what he had. Knowledge, proximity, a network of friends who trusted him, and the cold belief that he could design something that ended quickly, cleanly, without blood. It's an old lie told by clever people. The idea that harm can be minimized into a footnote, that what's stolen is the banks and not the people behind the counters and trucks. He began to plan the way only an insider can plan, not with fantasies, but with schedules. A schedule turns from means to end, when patience breaks and numbers bend. Then comes the hinge. One decision that makes every prior day prologue. Chapter 3. The Turning Point. Doctrine, not impulse. Turning points feel sudden and aren't. For months, maybe longer, Pace watched the facility the way a locksmith listens to tumbler clicks. He knew when doors were open because they had to be. He knew where cameras didn't quite overlap. He knew who would be on and when they would be tired. This isn't a manual. We won't tell you steps or methods. The point is the doctrine. Avoid violence, compress time, exploit routine, recruit only those you can synchronize. Move only when the system is at its weakest, predictable point. Reduce chance, increase control. Treat a building like a schedule you can hold in your hands. He convinced himself that minimizing harm made the wrong right enough. It didn't. It never does. But in the moment, the brain finds ways to bless what it wants. Chapter 4. Major moment, the Dunbar Heist. What we can say is simple. In the small hours of a late summer night, a small crew moved with a plan. Guards were subdued, shaken, frightened, but left alive. A vault that rarely saw strangers. Cash bricks that were supposed to travel slowly through weeks of routes moved out in minutes. The number was staggering. Approximately 18.9 million, an amount that made accountants in multiple zip codes stare at their calculators. No civilians were shot. No alarms brought a red and blue chorus to the street. The thieves used time as their weapon and silence as their exit. It was, by criminal standards, clean. And then it wasn't. Because a perfect crime doesn't exist. It can't. Too many human hands. Too many edges to catch on. They left the night without a smear, but day keeps books and day was near. Notoriety is oxygen for egos. For planners, it's poison. And the state breathes patience. Chapter 5. The Reckoning. Threads, agents, and a long memory. Big cases don't crack because of genius. They crack because of grit. The FBI and local law enforcement pulled at quiet threads, receipts that didn't look right, bills showing up in strange clusters, rumors that shade throws when too much money moves too fast. They interviewed, they waited, they watched for the one thing every big crew eventually produces, a mistake. It arrived, as it often does, in pride's clothing, cash used where it shouldn't have been, in a way that left a trace, a currency strap, a pattern, a timeline. One associate's carelessness became everyone's problem. A real estate transaction raised eyebrows. A phone call turned into a cooperation deal. The picture sharpened, arrests followed, courtrooms replaced warehouses, lawyers replaced lookout men. The charges were federal, the sentences were the kind you measure in calendars, not clocks. News anchors loved the contrast. The largest cash heist in U.S. history at the time, undone not by a dramatic chase, but by one uncut thread in a tapestry that was supposed to hang forever. A single strap, a single boast, and suddenly you're not a ghost. The debate that came next wasn't about whether it happened. It was about what the story meant. Chapter 6. Controversies and criticisms. Glamour versus harm. Insider threat versus trust. Caper stories seduce. They promise intelligence beating brute force, a victimless trick played on a faceless giant. But this job wasn't a parlor game. Guards were terrified. Workers who counted money for a living learned how quickly their regular night could become trauma. Every employee who wore that uniform afterward carried a new edge in their nerves. Security experts called it what it was: an insider threat case study. It sparked audits, camera coverage overlaps, key control, guard rotations, reconciling who has what knowledge and when they should lose it. The public learned what corporations had always known. The hardest enemy to guard against is someone you trust. Critics of the later retellings had a point. Put a dramatic soundtrack on a crime, and you risk turning harm into folklore. The better documentaries resisted that move. They put the ledger front and center. Human shock, institutional change, long time served. We love the riddle and forget the people who will never set their heartbeat back to every day. They carry what we edit away. He didn't leave a library of quotes, but a few lines attributed in courtrooms and coverage. Frame the man and the moment. Chapter 7. Words from the Shadows. It was an inside job. Prosecutors and agents used the phrase bluntly to frame the case in filings and press briefings. It became the shorthand in headlines and training slides alike. "I'm not telling you where the money is," widely paraphrased from coverage of proceedings and interviews with investigators. An idea that Pace refused to disclose where unrecovered cash had gone, even as years stretched ahead. Whether those were the exact words, the stance was clear: silence about the stash. All it took was one bank strap. Investigators told reporters a version of this line, an emblem for how big cases fail in small ways, how a single overlooked detail can drop the curtain. They aren't epigrams for posters. They're the gravel of a real story, pragmatic and cold. Not poetry, but proof and plea, a caution cut from custody. The fight he chose. Chapter 8. Fights, battles, and ideological struggle. Craft versus consequence. Alan Pace didn't have a cinematic rival. He had an opponent called time. He believed in precision enough to stake his liberty on it. The justice system believed in patience enough to take that bet. He fought with the same tools he used to plan: control, secrecy, loyalty to a circle, until cooperation broke the circle. The ideological struggle under it all is an old one. Does minimizing harm launder wrongdoing? Can nonviolent theft be romantic? Are institutions obliged to rebuild trust after an inside betrayal? How, and at what cost? Heist lore likes to end with a split score and a shrug. Real life ends with a bureaucracy and a bill. He wagered skill could beat the state. The state replied with longest wait. The impact spreads farther than the fear in one building. It ripples into Chapter 9. Impact on society. Aftershocks in concrete and policy. After the Dunbar case, armored carriers and banks recalibrated. Expect more than you see. Tightened background checks, rotation of sensitive roles, stricter key custody, camera coverage that leaves no dead zones, dual control rules that keep one pair of hands from holding too much. Insider threat programs matured, monitoring for behavioral red flags, auditing who accesses what and why, teaching managers that familiarity is not a control. Law enforcement academies teach the case as a masterclass in both sides, how inside knowledge can be weaponized, and how tiny post-crime mistakes are where truth hides. Insurance underwriters rewrote tables. Corporate security stopped treating loyalty as a substitute for control. In popular culture, the heist took its seat in a long row of true crime specials. Some smart, some sloppy. The best remembered the guards. A door is stronger when it learns the hand it trusts is where it turns. There is no death scene here, no grave to visit. There is a legacy, and it is made of caution. Chapter 10, Legacy and the Last Word. A mirror, not a map. Alan Pace served a long federal sentence. Much of the stolen cash was never publicly accounted for. Much of the life it cost, his and others, cannot be tallied. He did not become a celebrity with a talk show circuit. He became a caution. Inside training rooms, on security slides, in quiet corporate conversations about trust and verification. The public reaction never fully settled. Some admired the planning. Others, correctly, pointed to the harm. The lasting truth is simple and severe. Use your best gift on the wrong problem, and you build the cage you live in. Discipline, like flame, will grow. It lights a home or burns it low. Chapter 11, The Ending. Picture the vault again, not as a dragon's hoard, but as a crossroads for millions of ordinary days. Checks cashed, pay stubs moved, rent paid. Picture the guards who showed up because most of us sleep better when someone watches. Picture a man who knew the angles better than anyone and chose on one night to turn all that knowledge inward like a blade. Then picture the thing that ended it. Not a chase through sirens, but a scrap of paper, a